Well, I would just say, I've never been in favor of mandates, so let's just be clear on that. Now, there are things that have been in law that are legacy. In Florida, when you talk about schools, we have very generous exemptions. And so I think what you see is a lot of parents use that as it is now. And I also think a lot of people don't realize, there's a lot of countries in Europe, especially UK, Sweden, Norway, Ireland, most of the provinces in Canada here in North America, they have zero mandates. And yet you end up seeing pretty similar results. So I think people are conflating not forcing somebody with somehow not making it available. It'll be available for whoever wants it. But the way certainly our schools work now is parents do have, the ability, to exercise those exemptions. And the reality is this: since COVID and the disaster that the medical establishment inflicted on people and the lies that were told, people have lost confidence in the medical establishment. You have seen an increase in parents who are opting for those exemptions. The Surgeon General believes, and I believe, that if you actually didn't say you've got to take this, otherwise you're going to be punished, I think you'd actually have more uptake on some of those. I think there's some people, they're being told they have to do it, so they're opting for the exemption. But if they were told, hey, here's why you would want to do it, I actually think you'd see more. And that's why in Britain and some of these, they have high uptakes on those because people have trust. But one of the things so I've never been for mandates. But one of the things that I think is really, really frustrating to see how this gets weaponized. First, we saw it during COVID. They wanted to say that if you didn't get a COVID mRNA shot and show proof of that you shouldn't be able to go to restaurants, you shouldn't be able to go to sporting events, you shouldn't be able to attend college, you shouldn't be able to go K through 12 school without having any data to back that up. And they were even trying to impose mandates on people who had recovered from COVID and had natural immunity. So it was unscientific. It was basically them trying to control. Now, we batted that back in Florida. We banned vaccine passports. We made sure that colleges and universities couldn't mandate, no mandate K-12, no workplace mandates and everything like that. And that saved a lot of people's livelihoods and jobs who were not in a situation where that was something, that they wanted to do. But what happens now, and then the CDC under Biden, they added the COVID mRNA shot to the childhood immunization schedule. The problem with that is that there was not a scientific basis to do that. They're doing it and they're telling, and parents have rebelled. The vast majority of parents do not do the COVID shot for that. So it's like, where are they coming up with this? So I think the trust has really been broken. But what really bugs me, because I think the schools, there's exemptions, and so I actually don't think the outcome would be much different at all. But I think on some of these other things where you can be turned away from a doctor's office if your 6-year-old didn't take a hepatitis B shot, that's a sexually transmitted disease. Like, look, sitting in a classroom in kindergarten, I think the chance of contracting Hep B is probably pretty low based on how it's contracted. And so a lot of parents are like, that may not be what we want, but then you're going to be denied to be able to see. They have places, and I don't think it's going on in Florida, but we need protections against this, where they have denied people surgeries because they didn't have a flu shot, or they didn't have COVID jab, or they didn't have Hep B and some of this stuff. And that's really weaponizing this against people, imposing bad consequences on them just because the parent may have made a decision on one of those things. And I think that's pretty much where people are at. But the conflation of, if you don't force somebody to do something and impose penalties on them, then therefore they're not permitted to do it. No, of course they're permitted to do it. And I saw a lot of stuff over there. The Surgeon General of Florida is taking away vaccine. He never said anything. He never said that there wouldn't be any availability. Obviously, that's not his position. But I think his position is that if you provide information and persuasion, that's better than coercion. And here's the deal. You see a lot of back and forth up in Washington about CDC and everything. We just have to acknowledge that it was a catastrophic failure during COVID. And I'd say our Surgeon General, who feels very strongly about this, in March of 2020, Joe Ladapo said we shouldn't do lockdowns. He was pilloried for saying that. Very few people were willing to say that. He said you shouldn't be forcing young school children to wear masks shortly thereafter that. He was pilloried for saying that. He said that schools needed to be open for in-person instruction when Florida did it. He was supportive of that. He was pilloried for that. He said you should not mandate mRNA vaxes on people and let it be their choice. He was pilloried for that. So on all these different things, he was doing what he thought was correct policy and what was in the interest of people, including their individual freedom. And he was pilloried, but yet he was right. He was right on all those. All those things. The lockdowns were harmful. The mask mandates on kids. Now, I overruled those in Florida, but, you know, there were school districts that wanted to do it. The forcible mRNA shots, that was wrong. Having kids locked out of school for a year that was wrong. So, you know, you're in a situation where, you know, he's got very strong feelings about coercion ending up being counterproductive when it applies to these medical situations. And I would just say, because when, you know, he asked me, he's like, because he took certain action, there was regulatory mandates that were not in statute, like Hep B, and he said, first of all, we don't have the really true authority to be doing that. So he took that away. Even though there's exemptions, he's doing that. And then he's making sure that the exemptions can't be watered down. So that's the actions he actually took. Now, some of the stuff in statute, obviously, that would require additional legislation. But when he told me, he's like, look, I wanna say that I don't believe in any of these. You know, do you mind? I was like, speak, you know, say what you believe, man. You know, go ahead and do it. But I think one of the things when he told me, he's like, look, Britain doesn't have any mandates. Sweden doesn't have any mandates. Most of the provinces in Canada don't. Norway, Ireland, all these places. And basically, the results are not dissimilar from the United States in terms of all this. And I think the reason is because parents are provided information. They're not being coerced. They're doing it. And I think when given accurate information, I think they're going to do what's best for their kids. I mean, everyone wants their kids to grow up to be healthy. And I think that's what you see in those countries that don't use coercion and don't use mandates to be able to do it. But those exemptions that he is fortifying in Florida law, you know, are something that a lot of parents currently are opting into. And I think part of that is, I think some people just have views on what they want for their kids. But I do think some of it is a skepticism when they're being told, hey, wait a minute, you told me I had to put a mask on a 2-year-old kid. You told me I had to do this. And so when they're telling you, even if they're right, I think some people are pushing back against it. So it's going to take some time to rebuild trust there. And I think what the Surgeon General's position is the way you build trust is to provide information and use persuasion rather than try to ostracize people from society if they make a different choice. Can someone repeat that? I just couldn't hear enough. Was it about firearm safety? Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, yeah. So first of all, you know, it's interesting. You know, if you look throughout American history, they used to have shooting classes in a lot of schools. Like, I mean, you have these kids would be like, you know, 9th grade, and they're out doing this. It was really part of American culture. You actually, I mean, I remember the late Justice Antonin Scalia saying, he gave a talk that he used to have a rifle in New York City that he would bring to school, you know, back in the day. And so it's just, the culture in somewhat has shifted in some respects on it. But in terms of safety, you know, you have constitutionally protected rights. And the Second Amendment is one. But with rights come responsibility. And you have responsibility to be able to handle those firearms and exercise your rights in other ways apart from Second Amendment in a responsible way. And if you're impinging on other people, you know, if you're out there at a shooting range and, you know, you have some AD or something like that, then you're going to be held accountable for that. So, someone like Jay Collins, I mean, he's been through every type of firearms training, you could ever have at Fort Bragg and his elite special forces. Not everyone gets to go through that. But I think most people, the one thing I like about Florida, there's so many opportunities to be able to go to a class and to learn how to handle these firearms. And that's true for pistols. It's true for rifles. It really doesn't matter across the board. So I would encourage people, make sure you know what you're doing. You have a right, but you also have a responsibility to do it in an appropriate way. And if people are not able to exercise their rights in an appropriate way, you absolutely can be held accountable for that. And part of it in Florida is, this stuff can be done if you're not 18 under supervision of an adult, of course. But if you're school-age kid, you don't have access to that on your own, absent parent supervision, and that's always been the law. Now, I also think they, before I became governor, the legislature extinguished the right of 18 to 21-year-olds to be able to purchase long guns, and that's just something that I don't think was consistent with the state or federal constitution. To do a blanket prohibition on a constitutionally enumerated right, that's never been something that has really passed muster. I know that's being litigated now all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, but I was against it at the time and said so publicly as a candidate, and then now I've continued to take that position as governor. Well, look, the Surgeon General said, his position is he's going to work to do that. He recognizes his authority is important, and he's exercising it, but it's limited. It's not unlimited authority. And so as he goes and meets with legislatures, all these agencies propose bills every year, and they can do. Now, I would also say this. Apart from the overall mandates, which I think as people learn more about it, will understand that what the Surgeon General was saying was pretty consistent with what many countries are doing. And then if you look in practice with Florida having our exemptions the way we do, and a lot of parents opting for that I think likely you would see very, very similar outcomes, even in the absence of the current regime. And I actually think you'd see higher in some respects, because I think people would say, you know what, you're trusting me. Yeah, I'm going to listen. I think people have a more open mind on some of it. But we asked the legislature, all the stuff I talked about preventing people from losing their jobs or vaccine passports or all of that. We did that in 2021. Very important. The legislature sunsetted that. And so it was going to be sunset this year. So we said, hey, let's make it permanent. They didn't make it permanent. They just extended it. That's got to be made permanent. I mean, that to me is, everyone is glad that we did that. I mean, even the very far left, I don't hear them, at least publicly, they won't admit they're for vaccine passports. It doesn't make sense. So they need to do that. The other thing is addressing some of these issues of discrimination. I get, like, on some levels, if someone comes for medical care and you're just in private practice, I don't know that you're under any obligation to necessarily see everybody. I mean, you'd have to talk to doctors about that. I get there's a business component to this, but to say that a mom can't get her daughter in to see a pediatrician because while they did MMR and all the standard vaccines, they didn't do maybe Hep B or they didn't do COVID or some of those, to me, that's discrimination. I mean, that is limiting people's freedom to be able to do what they think is right for their kids by having these restrictions. And basically, it's a follow-on from mandates. And if you look at the CDC schedule compared to what it was when I was growing up to now, I mean, it's a lot of shots for these kids. And some parents, while I think 90+% would do the core, some of the other ones, particularly the new ones, some parents may choose not to. Maybe there's an individual reason. I would much rather let people make those decisions than to say, oh no, you're barred from seeing pretty much any physician going forward. And certainly, if somebody needs medical care and they need a transplant or something, to say that you're not going to be able to get that because you didn't do this shot or that shot, that is not what we want to do. So that is weaponized against people. And what we tried to do in this most recent session was really focus on the non-discrimination. The legislature did not go for that. And I think that, there is some currents in the legislature on both sides of the aisle. I mean, I think the Dems are very, very much, believe in the coercion. But I do think you have some Republicans who their view is that, people should face negative consequences for making different choices in that regard. And I think when you see those examples, you just kind of scratch your head and it's like, guys, you're losing the plot here to allow that. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of developed since then that I think is problematic. So make the stuff permanent that we've done. I think that's really important. We're going to take another whack at the non-discrimination as well. And then I know the Surgeon General feels strongly about any mandates for there. And like I said, I've always been against mandates, but I focused on the non-discrimination because I thought that was the easiest thing that we could do last session. And we got, I think a lot of members support non-discrimination, but I think some others, just have different views on it. And just as a dad, we want to make sure that the parents are able to be in the best position they can to do what they need for their kids. And if their kid needs a surgery or something, to be able to say you're going to be rejected. Remember, they were, and we fought back against this in Florida, but there was a long time in this country during COVID where people were being rejected for medical care in different parts of the country.
Governor DeSantis continuing to talk about the push to end vaccine mandates, some other parental rights issues as well. We've got to take another break here on Fox Local, but keep it here. We'll be right back.